That's going to be hard. So I will try and do my best to remind you, but that's just the tip that the tech people gave us. So when you talk, just try and move with the microphone. And so I'll just go check and see where we're at for quorum.
Board Member Riley, can we check your mic and your video, please?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Hopefully the video is working too.
Trying to find you. I still, oh, nope. That's not. Yes, I can see you too. Thank you. All right, I think we'll go ahead and start the meeting. We have a quorum now. So welcome to the meeting of the December Environmental Quality Board, or EQB. I'm Nancy Daubenberger. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Transportation and the Chair of EQB. And we will go ahead and turn it to Interim Executive Director Eric Dahl, who will do the roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll start with the roll call. Let's start with public member Joseph Bauerkemper.
Here, present. Thank you.
Thank you. Public member Kenneth Foster.
Here, present.
Public member Riley Hintz. Right. Member Mehmet Koner-Steenberg.
Yes, here. Thank you.
Right. And public member Nicholas Martin. Here. Right. Public member Paul Nelson. Commissioner Sarah Stroman.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Gerald Van Amberg.
Yes, good afternoon. Present.
Member Peter Bakken. Okay. Member Grace Arnold. Member Commissioner Steve Grove. Member Commissioner Rena Kessler. Proxy member Dan Huff.
Good afternoon. I just want to express the regret from Commissioner Jan Malcolm. She was really hoping to attend today, but she was double booked with the Minnesota Interagency Council on Homelessness chaired by Lieutenant Governor, and she had to be present for that to do a presentation. So she sends her regrets and very much appreciates the continued great work of the EQB.
Thank you. Then proxy Stephen Ruse for the Department of Ag. Commissioner Member Alice Roberts Davis. And then, Madam Chair, back to you. We do have a quorum at this point.
Great. Thank you for that. And thank you all for your participation today, whether it is here in person or online. Really appreciate the participation. And hopefully those who have been out driving today found the roads to be traversable. I know our crews were out overnight last night working on the roads, and they're going to have some long days ahead of them based on the forecast. So wherever you are in the state, you might be fighting some different challenges out there. But anyway, with that, we will go ahead, and since we have a quorum, we can move on to the approval of the consent agenda. So in your packet, you should have the meeting minutes from November 16th, as well as the preliminary agenda for the meeting today, December 14th's meeting of our EQB. So if you are joining virtually, please unmute yourself for this part of the agenda. And is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Public Member Nelson. Is there a second? Thank you, Public Member Martin. All right, is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Hearing no opposition, the motion carries and the consent agenda is adopted. So now I will turn it over to our Acting Director, Eric Cedar-Leaf-Dahl, for the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I realized also that I forgot to welcome Sue Vento as the proxy for the Met Council. I believe that you're here, Sue.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Eric, if I could just tag on to Dan Huff's comments, I'd please extend to Commissioner Malcolm how appreciated she was. I have many friends who I heard from throughout the daily briefings that the commissioner and the governor gave, and so many of them really deeply appreciated it, including a friend who continued watching while she was in Colorado for part of the time. So thank you to her for her just incredible service to the state, but most especially to her and to all of you at the department during these last couple years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will be sure to pass that along to Commissioner Malcolm.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate those words.
All right, so then moving on to the Executive Director's report, I've got a few announcements. So this winter, the EQB will be launching a new EQB monitor submittal service. It's called the Odyssey Project, and the submittal service will replace the current EQB monitor submission process, and responsible government units and consultants for RGUs will use the submittal service to submit environmental review notices, and other government agencies will use the submittal service to submit other general notices for publication in the EQB monitor, and EQB will be able to better track data related to that. We'll also be launching a new web page with a searchable database from all that data that's collected via the Odyssey project. So we're excited once that kicks off here in 2023. Also, EQB recently submitted our obsolete rules report to the legislature, which that's due every year on December 1st. It's a look at our obsolete, unnecessary, and duplicative rules within Minnesota Rules Chapter 4410. There's a copy of the report over on the table over there if you're interested, but we held a public feedback section and passed that on to the legislature, and that will use that in future considerations for rulemaking and other changes. I also wanted to let everyone know that the executive director is posted, and that's under job ID 61055, but EQB will be promoting the executive director posting. It's open until December 30th, and we'll be sending out messages on our EQB monitor as well as our social media, and I'll be reaching out to each of the commissioner members to see about promoting it via your social media as well. And so that's open till December 30th, and we hope to get lots of great applicants. You can go to the next slide, Kayla. I just wanted to remind everyone that Congressional District 3 is open. We're taking applications. You can apply on the Secretary of State website, and it'll be open until filled. We expect to hopefully fill that around March, what the guess is. And then just another couple announcements on in January, on January 24th, the EQB water team and interagency water team is going to be holding a half-day workshop to foster collaboration and conversation around one of the EQB water plan goals, Goal 5, Strategy 4, which is to conduct research and engagement to address the impacts of the changing water resources and ecosystems on mental health and well-being. We're going to be working with the U of M to kind of build new relationships with researchers at the U of M and look for opportunities to translate that research into applied programs at the state. And so that we're excited about that. And then also the youth with MYC Environmental Justice Committee is going to be holding a meeting on Sunday, January 15th. And if any board members are interested in joining that meeting, it'll be from about 1 to 3 p.m. It's hosted by the Alliance for Youth. And it'd be a great opportunity to meet some of the folks connected with that. And so if you're interested in that, please reach out to me and I can help connect you. And with that, Madam Chair, I guess I have one other thing, and that's if you can move it forward to just how to public comment, everyone. Remember, if you're in the room, the microphones, try and keep it right in front of your mouth because they're unidirectional instead of omnidirectional. And if you're online, you can raise your hand via WebEx. That's the preferred option, or you can type your name in the WebEx chat. And if you go to the next slide, you can see how to raise your hand on the screen, and EQB staff will let us know that you've raised your hand, and then we'll include you in the public comment. And then we can move forward with that. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thank you, Director Dahl, for that report. So then we can move on to our first items on the agenda. And they are from the chair of the subcommittee for the pilot program implementation, so SPPI, and the chair of the environmental review implementation subcommittee, ERIS, as we call it, and they will walk us through the pilot program process. The board directed staff to use the pilot the EAW form changes, and that was approved by the board in September of 21. And you'll see what we are talking about here on this slide. And the board directed staff to return and report the results of that pilot program, provide a revised EAW form for board action no later than December of 22. So that's where we are at today. So I'll now introduce the agenda item, the summary of the subcommittee for the pilot program implementation, SPPI, discussion recommendations. So with that, welcome board member and chair of SPPI, Nicholas Martin.
Great, thank you, Chair Develberger. I'm Nick Martin. I had the honor to be the chair of the subcommittee for pilot program implementation, along with public members Mehmet Koner-Steenberg, Joseph Bauerkemper, Riley Hintz, and Commissioner Arnold, who were also on the subcommittee. And I'm going to just take a little time today to sort of summarize part of mainly the implementation part of the pilot program, and then Commissioner Stroman will talk a little bit more about results. But just as Chair Develberger said, it was in a September 2021 board resolution when the board decided to implement a pilot program, sort of about a year-long pilot program to test the new environmental assessment worksheet form, and convene a subcommittee to sort of oversee that process and assist EQB staff in the design of the pilot program. So that's the part I'm going to be talking about today. Again, the goal I'd say this process started actually significantly before, because the EQB staff was working with an interagency technical team to sort of develop potential new questions for the climate-related questions for the EAW form, develop technical guidance, and that had sort of all gone on before. But the decision made by the board in September 2021 was to pilot rather than immediately requiring use of the new EAW form. So the purpose, the charge given to the Subcommittee for Pilot Program Implementation, the SPPI, was, like I said, really to sort of help staff in the design and implementation of the pilot program. Things like, how should the pilot approach outreach and recruitment to get broad representation across Minnesota, and including representation of, the responsible governmental units, RGUs, project proposers, consultants, and the public. How should we define effectiveness and efficiency in sort of evaluating the new EAW form? Those were the key sort of things we were trying to define, and what sort of metrics should we establish for effectiveness and efficiency? And then how should we translate those into questions to be asked of pilot program participants? We did that part, and we met in November and December of 2021, met a couple of times to sort of consider those questions, discuss as a subcommittee and get public input on those questions. And then the staff really oversaw implementation of the pilot between January and September of this year. We met once more, we as a subcommittee met once more in August of this year to sort of affirm or validate the effective implementation of the pilot program. And then we sort of pass our recommendations on to the Environmental Review Implementation Committee, which Commissioner Stroman will, as the chair of that, will talk about that. So she'll talk more about results. I'm really talking about the implementation part. The purpose that we set out for the pilot was to learn what's working and not working as RGUs use the new revised EAW form that now requires both carbon footprint sort of information or greenhouse gas quantification on the one hand, and information on climate trends in the area of a project that's being reviewed as well. Better understand the effectiveness of climate information on the EAW, better identify additional resources and guidance that could be helpful to everyone using the EAW as they work to answer these new questions, and understand if adjustments are needed to the EAW form that might improve its effectiveness. So we really weren't, I want to emphasize, we weren't, the question before us was not whether climate information would be included on the EAW. That decision had already been made in September 2021. But it was really, how could we test implementation and use of this new form? Were there things that could be made clearer on the form, additional guidance that could be provided to make sure that these questions can be answered efficiently, in the sense of like not imposing unreasonable additional cost or administrative burden, and effectively in the sense of providing useful information. You can go on to the next slide. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that the last time. So the pilot design that we came up with and worked together with EQB staff on included a targeted recruitment and outreach strategy, and with a particular focus on Greater Minnesota, because we wanted to make sure this was not sort of a metro-dominated set of people participating in the pilot. There are different concerns in different parts of Minnesota. Secondly, the purpose was to provide support and technical assistance to the pilot program participants. So for that, staff did a couple of things. They created a speaker series in which expert speakers were invited on topics like greenhouse gas quantification calculators, climate models and tools to think about climate trends in the area of a project. An environmental advocate spoke at another of these meetings to give a sense of like what our environmental advocates looking for in environmental assessment worksheet forms. A panel of legal experts gave one of these speaker series presentations to discuss their considerations when developing administrative records of decision based on EAW forms. And there were a couple of others as well. I think the Department of Transportation presented their greenhouse gas calculator tool. So that was sort of providing technical expertise for anyone who wanted to attend. Those were open to the public. And then along with that, there was a cohort series where, which was just participants in the pilot program could, talk to each other and ask more detailed questions of the technical presenters. And so those cohort meetings all happened right after the speaker series presentations. And then another important part of the pilot design was really the development of surveys. So once we came up with these definitions of efficiency and effectiveness and a set of questions to ask, the task given to the staff was then how do we get information from a broad set of participants, certainly the participants in the pilot program, but also certain mechanisms to get feedback from the public and from anyone concerned with climate information on EAWs. And Denise, I think, will talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. Just the numbers on this slide really are things that Denise, as the Director of Environmental Review, can speak about in more detail. This was all to the credit of the staff that this much outreach was done. But on this slide, I just want to sort of give you a sense of the overall effort that went into the pilot program to get the word out. 38 announcements went into the EQB monitor, which reaches an average of 4,300 subscribers, to sort of reach out and make sure anyone interested in the environmental review program, including state and local governments, project proposers, members of the public, technical consultants, and environmental advocates had the chance to provide input. Staff made 102 phone calls to local government agencies, any that had published an EAW at some time in the last 3 years. And I won't go through all the numbers, but you see on the bottom of the screen there that the overall numbers participating in one or more aspects of the pilot program were quite strong. Next slide. So just a little bit about the outcomes, again, just of the sort of overall design and implementation. The pilot over those 9 months included a pretty diverse range of projects, and those do reflect the most frequent project types that prepare EAWs in a typical year. They included a relatively typical breakdown of RGUs between sort of Metro and Greater Minnesota state agency RGUs and local government RGUs. That was fairly typical of any average year, and project locations. We as a subcommittee felt that the pilot design was strong in the sense that it provided adequate opportunities for participation and providing feedback. One of the things I think is worth noting, it's certainly not every single project type or every county of Minnesota was represented in the pilot program. And one of the things that we discussed was, is that a reason to not approve the form now and continue the pilot, say for another year, in the hope of getting more project types that weren't represented or more counties? And it's somewhat inevitable that we wouldn't have covered everything, because in a given year, some project types just don't have we felt ultimately that because most project types were included and the distribution of state and local RGUs and Metro and Greater Minnesota was fairly typical, we felt that extending the pilot for another year would not necessarily get better data. It might be that you would not necessarily catch the project types in the second year that you were missing in the first year. And we didn't think it would necessarily reach different conclusions. And so instead, what we're going to be recommending is adoption of the revised EAW form, what we're calling the December 2022 form. But then, recognizing that not every question has been answered, Denise will provide describe a fairly detailed what we're calling the implementation plan, but a fairly detailed effort to provide support to RGUs and others using the EAW, including, more sector-specific guidance, potentially Minnesota-specific greenhouse gas calculators, just sort of different kinds of support that people can call on. I won't go more into that because that's going to be the primary focus of Denise's presentation. So I think at this point, I am either going to, and Eric, maybe you can give me some guidance. I want to hand off to Commissioner Stroman to talk about results, but I don't know if at this point should I give my fellow SPPI members a chance to add anything I may have missed or.
Thank you, Public Member Martin, for for chairing the subcommittee and your leadership on it and that great summary. Yes, certainly, if any other SPPI members would like to add on to what Public Member Martin described, please go ahead and raise your hand or just jump in. We're not seeing or hearing anything, so I think you did a great job summarizing again for that. All right, so, but before we turn it over to Commissioner Stroman, are there any questions for Public Member Martin or other board members on this point on the implementation? Go into the recommendations. Commissioner Stroman will talk about the recommendations that came out of ARIS, but on what was described by Public Member Martin on the implementation. Pause for questions. Okay, not seeing any hands or hearing anything, we will then go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, which is the summary from the Environmental Review Implementation Subcommittee, or ARIS. So welcome Board Member, DNR Commissioner Sarah Stroman, ARIS Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm pleased to provide this summary to the EQB Board of the meeting that the Environmental Review Implementation Subcommittee had in October. The purpose of that meeting and our main agenda item was, as you all have heard, to review the results of the pilot program and to consider a recommendation regarding the EAW form to the board. So we're pleased to do that today. I just want to add my thanks as the chair of the Environmental Review Implementation Subcommittee to SPPI Chair Nick Martin and to that group. I think it was as ARIS made the decision to conduct a pilot program before finalizing changes to the form, I think it was really important to have a group of board members working with staff to create that pilot, to follow through on the implementation. And so I just want to extend my thanks. And I think it made the work of our subcommittee, the ARIS subcommittee, much easier, and so much of the legwork was done. So thank you for that. So as I said, I'm going to walk through the results of the pilot program that the ARIS subcommittee reviewed in October, and then we'll talk about the recommendation from ARIS to the board. So I think we can go to the next slide. So essentially, this shows the number of pilot EAWs that went through this program. We had 14. We looked at the project types that were covered in those pilot EAWs. We looked at the number that were evaluated by state responsible governmental units, the number that were evaluated by local responsible governmental units, broke that down into Metro and Greater Minnesota, and then looked at the projects that were located in Greater Minnesota. And so as you can see here, the 14 of there were 76 total EAWs published during the period of the pilot. 14 of those, or 18%, used the draft revised EAW form. You can see there in the second column labeled project types, there was a variety of project types. And so we did see that most of the project types that are reviewed in an average year were included in this pilot period. The two notable exceptions there that you would see in an average year are animal feedlot projects and highway projects. What we learned too is that we had a typical distribution of state evaluated projects. That's 43% compared to the average of 32 of all projects, and local government units. We had 57 projects, 57% that were evaluated by local RGUs and 68% that would occur during an average year. Now, I will note that these percentages, right, are based on a total pool of 14. So let's just, remember that the pilot is small, but I think the point here is that when you look at what we saw, the percentages that we saw in the pilot compared to what we see in a typical year, IRIS concluded that generally the 14 EAWs in that pilot generally represented the scope and scale of EAWs that we would see in a typical year. And then lastly, similarly with the number of pilot projects reflected that are located in greater Minnesota. So that's what we saw in that evaluation in the results of, did the pilot reflect what we would normally see in a typical year? So if we can go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about those surveys and the outreach that SPPI Chair Martin talked about. And generally in the feedback from the surveys, the indication from those survey responses were that project proposers and RGUs were able to answer all the questions. Most of the survey responses that we received were supportive or neutral of the questions on the EAW form. So either they thought the questions were good questions, or they were neutral on that fact, but did not see a lot of indication of problems with the questions. We saw a desire from state and local RGUs for sector and source specific guidance. And so I think Denise will talk more about the guidance that we're talking about there and how we're going to move forward on that. Most of the respondents agreed that the climate questions on the EAW form were clear and unambiguous. Project proposers and consultants could complete the data portions of the EAW. And so, really, we didn't get any specific suggestions for revisions to the questions. And so, really, the headline conclusion was there was nothing in that survey data that suggested specific revisions or suggested that there was anything in that form that was flawed, rather that the form could be used both effectively and efficiently, as SPPI Chair Martin indicated. So if we can go to the next slide, I think the conclusions from the pilot, as we've sort of reiterated a number of times, were that RGUs were able to comply with the environmental review procedures in a cost-effective and timely manner relevant to project-specific needs, and that EAWs published during this pilot program using the draft revised EAW form accurately and consistently provided usable climate information to project proposers and RGUs and members of the public. And I will just note, again, because our sample number is small in the pilot, the number of surveys was even smaller than that. And so one of the things that ARIS looked at was, in addition to the surveys, all of the elements of the pilot implementation activities in making its conclusions. And so it was, I think, that really robust approach to outreach that the SPPI recommended and undertook in having not only surveys, but the conversations and the speakers, so that we really had not only some, quantitative data through the surveys, but really understood qualitatively what was the experience of our project proposers, the RGUs, and members of the public in using that new form. So that brings us to the recommendation itself. And I know, Chair Martin, you hinted at the SPPI's recommendations and talked about that, but as we're here now to talk about both of the subcommittee's final recommendations, I think I'll turn to you first to share any additional thoughts you have about the SPPI's final recommendation, and then I'll come back and share the highlights of ARIS in our final recommendation to the board today.
Thanks, Commissioner Stroman. So speaking on behalf of the SPPI, and certainly would welcome any of my fellow committee members to jump in as well. But our recommendation, our consensus as a committee is that that this is a good time to approve the EAW with the addition of the climate-related questions for projects going forward from the date of the resolution. We think that the pilot has provided, broad-based participation and provided an adequate opportunity to sort of test the form, make sure that it's not, as Commissioner Stroman talked about, people didn't find it unclear. Some people did speak to the desire for additional technical guidance. And so their EQB staff is thinking about that, and Denise will talk about that. So our recommendation is to approve the form and to then provide significant technical support over the next year in the implementation plan that will be discussed shortly. Anything that my fellow subcommittee members wanted to add to that?
Madam Chair, would you like me to continue with the ARIS recommendations unless you're seeing somebody else who wants to jump in?
I am not seeing any hands up nor hearing anything, so let's go back to you, Commissioner Stroman.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think as I present the recommendation here, I think it's just important to reiterate something that SPPI Chair Martin noted earlier, which was that the board had already made a decision to incorporate considerations of climate into the environmental review process, into the EAW form. And this is something that has been on the board's to-do list, I think going back actually to 2019. And there was a strong desire in all of the board's conversations leading up to this pilot that there was a desire to move quickly in order to respond to the urgency that members of the public and as a state were feeling around the climate threat. But there was also a strong desire to get it right. And so as ARIS looked at the conclusions and the results of the pilot, I think we confirmed our hopes that the pilot would be a good way to test whether we were getting it right. And again, given that nothing in those pilot results yielded any information that would lead us to believe there was some fatal flaw in the form, and more than that, the form did provide effective information for the public, for RGUs. It was usable by project proposers. We did not receive any specific suggestions for revisions. And so based on all of that result information through the pilot, and I think strong consideration from the subcommittee that the process was really thorough, that, we took enough time again to get it right while taking it seriously in light of the urgency. But as you've heard, there was a lot of board involvement with the SPPI subcommittee, with the ARIS subcommittee, and now the full board itself. There was a tremendous amount of public outreach, a tremendous amount of a variety of ways that the public could weigh in, and made sure that outreach and input was broad-based. And so based on those things, the recommendation from the ERAS subcommittee is that the board approve the December 2022 environmental assessment worksheet form. And similar to the recommendation from the SPPI, we also recommended that there be additional technical assistance and guidance worked on to continue to make sure that the implementation of the new form is successful. And again, as Chair Martin said, I know Ms. Wilson will talk more about that shortly. So that is the recommendation from ERAS. I will also offer an opportunity for any of the members of that subcommittee to share any additional thoughts or their personal observations that I didn't include in this general overall summary. And if nobody has anything to share, Madam Chair, the meeting goes back to you.
Thank you, board member and Commissioner Stroman. All right, and so we'll pause just to see if there are any hands up for additions to what Commissioner Stroman was just describing. I'm not hearing anything nor seeing any hands. So let's go to questions for board member Commissioner Stroman from other board members or from public member Martin, or questions for public member Martin at this point. Any questions before we move on in the agenda from board members? I don't think I'm seeing any hands up. Okay, and before we move on in the agenda, I believe over the last few topics of discussion, we had a couple board members join. So I'm just going to do a little tech check here and verify that. So was it public member Bakken? Were you able to join us? It looks like public member Bakken is on. He might not be able to connect with audio though, or we can't hear him. Great. Also, I think there was a Katrina who jumped on. So is Commissioner Kessler, is that you who was just able to join us as well? Okay, well, looks like they're on, but might be an audio issue. So, all right, well, why don't we go ahead and move on then to our next item on the agenda, and that would be the approval of this December 22 environmental assessment worksheet form. So EQB Director of Environmental Review, Denise Wilson, will present the board. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. For members of the audience, my name is Denise Wilson, and I work for the Environmental Quality Board as the Director of the State Environmental Review Program. Next slide, please. So here's the language that you'll be voting on today. I'll bring this slide up again during board discussion on the topic, but wanted to point out that the draft resolution can be found on page 8 of your board packet. The resolution also identifies the responsibilities and authorities of the board and the chair for making changes to the EAW form, as well as considerations that support the need for the changes. Next slide, please. So once the board approves a final EAW form, EQB staff will follow the implementation plan discussed in this outline. So communication messages will be sent with notifications that a new form is required to be used. Surveys with a more limited scope than the pilot will be sent only to RGUs to provide an opportunity to let EQB staff know of issues and concerns with the climate assessments on the EAW form as it is more broadly implemented. Technical support will continue through EQB's existing technical assistance program. Updates to the existing climate assessment guidance will be finalized with additional guidance needs scoped and developed. And then we're proposing an ombuds pilot, which would be one person who would be assigned a portion of their time to address any concerns that might come up between members of the public, between and RGUs or technical consultants or project proposers to help resolve those issues and concerns, make a first attempt at doing that, but also as a safe space to sort of share information between RGUs and technical experts. And so that ombuds pilot will be initiated and notifications sent with links to a new EQB webpage. And then we're proposing that any substantive issues or concerns that are raised through any of these mechanisms for input, that the ombuds pilot or the ombuds will bring that concern to the ARIS chair to determine the best course of action to resolve the issue. Next slide, please. So among EQB staff, we often say we are small, but we are mighty. And that is because of the support we receive from EQB member agency staff. We are efficient and effective because they contribute their experience and expertise to our efforts. I would like to take a minute to acknowledge these members of the Interagency Climate Technical Team for their commitment to this project over the last 3 years. The success of this project was also a testament to all of the support and advice we received from RGUs, project proposers, environmental advocates, members of the public, and technical consultants. We received over 1,000 comments on the draft recommendations. We considered feedback we received from public participation and discussions during ARIS and board meetings, from registered pilot participants, from members of the public that commented on projects using the draft EAW form, and from everyone that participated in the speaker sessions and cohort meetings. And I would also like to thank Bar Engineering for their technical expertise during the engagement process when we assessed the draft recommendations. And I'll pause here. That's concludes my presentation, but I'll pause and see if there are any specific questions related to any aspect or element of the pilot program.
Thank you, Denise. Any questions for Denise? By board members. Oh, public member Bauer-Kemper, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentations. Much gratitude for all the work that's gone into this. Member Martin and Commissioner Stroman and the subcommittees and Denise, the staff as well that you've noted, and you, of course. I have a particular question about the Ombuds program. Is that pilot going to pertain to all aspects of the EAW or only to those changes under consideration today?
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Board Member Bauer-Kemper, Madam Chair. Right now, the pilot is being as recommended that it focus just on the climate aspects of the EAW form, just to allow for the staff time that's available to commit to that role. However, in the future, the board could consider whether or not you'd like to expand that position to apply to the environmental review program more broadly.
All right, thank you. Sounds reasonable. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Other question? Public member Martin, go ahead.
Denise, thanks for your presentation. I'm curious, climate science is always evolving and in particular getting more granular and refined regarding the sort of geographic specificity or downscaling of climate models to address impacts in particular areas. And I know that, the university is working on that, others are working on that. How do you envision as the guidance evolves, right now there's some published guidance that points toward particular climate models, but there might be things not on that list because they didn't exist yet when the technical team was developing it. How do you envision those sorts of resources being made available as they come out to help people answer these questions about climate impacts in a very, specific location of their project.
Thank you, Board Member Martin, for that question. And Madam Chair, board members, the climate technical team actually did consider how rapidly changing the climate technical information, how it's rapidly changing. And so they've committed to staying together and meeting on a quarterly basis to sort of check in and identify if there are any changes needed, and we'll be able to change that guidance in real time. And we have a couple of other proposals in the implementation plan related to guidance. And one would be, making a request to the legislature for funding for additional, for funding a Minnesota specific assessment and planning tool, a climate, how I say that, a greenhouse gas quantification and planning tool, as well as a position that would work with RGUs to develop that sector and source specific guidance. And then we also have a recommendation that we work with some folks to help EQB develop best practices guidance. The role of EQB is really oversight of the program. The technical analysis is really at the discretion of the RGU. But I think we could actually develop some guidance that would help RGUs better understand their discretion, and also help build that professional judgment through this guidance, and support them during their experience for implementing these requirements.
Thank you, Denise. Okay, any other questions for Denise from board members? While we're pausing here, I will mention it looks like Commissioner Grace Arnold joined us. Thank you for joining us, Board Member Arnold.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
I am not seeing any additional hands up or hearing any additional questions. So before, though, we have the board consider the resolution, we do have time for public comment related to this EAW form item. Is somebody jumping in? Oh, I just got alerted. It sounds like Commissioner Tom Peterson, Board Member Peterson is on. Welcome, Board Member Peterson. Right. But with that, we will go to public comment on this EAW form item. And we had one person sign up who's here today. I will go ahead and call on Tony Juanes. You can go ahead and introduce yourself. Eric, any additional instructions?
Single directional now, so I want to make sure that that's okay. And thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Tony Quillis. I'm the Director of Environmental Policy at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and I was fortunate enough to make these comments earlier at Environmental Review Implementation Subcommittee. So I apologize to Mr. Nelson, Assistant Commissioner Huff, and Commissioner Stroman, who have heard them before, but just had a couple of comments and observations about the statistics, mainly in the data that were included and that we looked at when we went through some of the pilot projects. And the concerns, there are only 14 projects that were involved in the pilot. And some of that has to do with probably COVID or market conditions, but they were mainly limited in areas of project type: creep mitigation, wastewater treatment facilities, apartment complex, habitat restoration. So there were some concerns there. And then also that they are limited mainly towards the metropolitan area. Some in greater Minnesota, but mainly in the metropolitan area. So the concern is that that maybe we shouldn't look at a one size fits all, that some of the projects that go through this might not be applicable to all projects in the state. And I know Nick has referenced it, and I think Commissioner Stroman referenced it. Denise Wilson and the EQB staff did a great job of trying to reach out, seek input. But I think us as individuals and as society, we're always hesitant to take surveys. How was your Amazon experience? How was it when you flew Sun Country? How did you like, your US Bank experience? We're kind of always hesitant to do that. And they tried hard to try and tease out of those pilot folks, but unfortunately, there's a limitation to the data. And just looking at it and reading from some of the conclusions, in total, there weren't sufficient survey responses to validate or disprove effectiveness or efficiency. Another quote, it may not provide complete or unambiguous answers to all the questions members of the board may have about changes to the EAW form. I thought was most telling to me was when I looked at some of the responses to some of the questions that the EQB staff laid out was the responses from state RGUs. And some of the comments were not clear what details are being requested, not clear what details will be useful. Some of the questions asked the project proposer to estimate greenhouse gas emissions for the equipment that isn't running yet, which has not been chosen yet because the project has not been bid out and contractors selected. Lots of unavoidable guesswork. So multiple unknowns about equipment, duration, and other needs that may occur during the project. There was another question in there on the complexity, and there was 9 responses that came through, and 5 of the 9 said it's going to add more complexity to the EAD. So when I talk to our members about this, specifically environmental review and environmental permitting, time, cost, and uncertainty are the 3 things that come up and their main concerns about environmental review and environmental permitting. And just looking at some of the questions, just the total EAW hours on some of the survey responses were 134 hours for the total EAW to complete it, 15 hours alone on just the climate assessment. For the entire EAW, some of the costs financially, $20,000 to $150,000 were some of the ranges. Talking to some of our members that do this or would have to go through and do this, that weren't part of the pilot, we've heard anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 costs and could add up to 2 to 3 weeks to some of the projects. That might not seem like a lot, but to a small and medium-sized business, it is factor into their equations as they look at some of the projects here in the state. One of the last things is when you look at some of the, there were some questions about some of the guidance documents, and the guidance document comments were confusing, lots of them, difficult to follow. And I know Denise had heard those and is trying to work, and she referenced some of it there, to try and clarify those and make them a little bit more useful for folks that are going to go through this. But in conclusion, Madam Chair, I just like to mention that maybe we should pause and kind of reflect and maybe reevaluate if maybe we should possibly extend the pilot project. Mr. Martin referenced it that they had at least looked at it, maybe extend it for another year, see if we can get some more data on some of these projects. And if we do, maybe get some more survey responses, and I'm more than willing to help out in trying to do that. And Denise and I have had some great conversations along this line. But just thank you very much for allowing me to make those comments, and I appreciate it. And we'll stick around if there's any.
Eric, and thank you for those comments. And I understand we have another commenter online, and that is Joy Anderson. Joy, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I'm Joy Anderson. I'm an attorney with Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. I'm here today to say that MCEA supports the revisions to the EAW form that resulted from the pilot program. The EQB should approve the new EAW form and get it into circulation today. Today's vote is the culmination of years of work by EQB staff, consultants, and members of this board and its subcommittees who have dedicated their time and expertise to making sure that projects in environmental review provide critical information about the project's climate impacts. Climate change, as our governor has recognized, is an existential threat for all people in Minnesota, and we must act now to address and prepare for its effects. The changes to the EAW form that are being considered today will ensure that government decision makers and the public have information about projects' climate change effects before decisions are made. And the changes also benefit project proposers by ensuring that they consider how to make their projects more sustainable and resilient, which saves them money in the long run. The pilot project and the survey information that has been approved by the subcommittee has demonstrated that the new form is workable, can be completed in a cost-effective and timely manner, and provides useful information. Although there have been a limited number of projects that have gone through the pilot, they have covered a number of different areas. And in fact, there aren't that many different kinds of projects that go through environmental review each year. You could probably have a pilot for 10 years and still not get certain kinds of projects covered. In addition, although some people may believe that this should not be applicable to all projects in the state, in fact, this analysis will not be applicable to all projects in the state, just those that are considered large enough and to have extensive enough environmental effects to go through environmental review. The EAW changes should be implemented now. I want to thank the EQB board, staff, and the committee members for all their work on this important project, which will help Minnesota make better decisions that will protect our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Joy. Okay. No other commenters that we're seeing, but I'm going to pause and just check to see. Last call for public comments on this particular EAW December 22 form. Okay, we're not seeing anything. So again, thank you for the comments and your engagement in this process. Now the board will have time to have discussion on the resolution. And so I see the slide is up that, or there it is, that has the resolution that is also in your board packet on page 8. Why don't I pause here now for any discussion on this resolution? Got a side note here. It does sound like Commissioner Kessler is on now and she can hear. And Public Member Bakken looks like is back on. We're not sure if he can hear everything yet, but is back on.
Hello. I did raise my hand here, but I'm not sure you can see that.
Oh, I'm sorry, missed you. Go ahead, Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, and sorry that I'm late. Actually, I'm just thinking about, I've really been struggling with this over the last month or so, and I'm inclined to vote for it. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank the EQB staff for their work on this and really working to answer questions and to really go through this. I will say though that I am somewhat worried about the cost that this puts on project proposers. And that was one thing that I kind of asked our staff to look into and to, and to gather, and then to look at what are we doing as we get that information, and then how are we going to use that information and then the cost, because I do think it's really important. Actually, the reason I'm late is I came from the Governor's Trade Awards out at the airport, where we also had probably 5 meetings with people before and after with companies that are looking to move here to Minnesota, and they're looking to do business. And their question to me is, are we, we're looking at the Dakotas, we're looking at Iowa, what are our costs? What are our assurances of having our businesses here in Minnesota? And so Minnesota has a lot of great things that we can talk about: low unemployment, our workforce, our trained workforce, and everything else. But I think that as we look at what are the assurances into building a new plant, and a lot of these are green technologies or green energies, I think that, is a concern of mine as we look at that. And so being very clear when we're working with the environmental review that has to be, made clear. And so I just, is a concern of mine. I'm going to vote for this, but I continue to, look at that, and we're going to, have to continue to have that discussion as we move forward. But thanks for letting me have an opportunity to say something.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Board Member Peterson. Right. Any other board member comments? Okay. We do have Jerry Van Amberg. Jerry, go ahead and provide your comment.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'd like to first of all thank the staff and board members and others that put so much time in developing this worksheet and bringing it to us and explaining it. I understand Commissioner Peterson's concern, very much so. And I have some of the same concerns. When I think about it, but I look at it and I think, what else can we do? We are in a time where climate change is so important and means so much to us as to what it might cost us otherwise with the change in climate, that I don't see any other way except to have a worksheet that has us look at the actual climate impacts. If we don't start looking at climate impacts and evaluating them, we just aren't going to get anywhere, I don't think. So I'm very much inclined to support this. One of the things I wanted to mention in the sheet here, I think it's under considerations with the, let me get to it. With the resolution under considerations. I don't know if this is part of the be published or not, but something I noticed was that it says that climate change is identified as a potentially significant environmental issue. I would like to suggest that potentially be taken out of that wording if it's something that is actually published, because we're beyond potential as far as I think and see with climate change. But I say I support this. I think it's a very important change, knowing that it will be problematic to some. It'll cost more. It'll take more time. But that's part of the price we have to pay in solving working to solve a huge problem that, as has been explained, is an existential threat to our world. Thank you.
You, Bowser Chair. It's in the board packet where we have the resolution topic, the considerations, I believe is what Jerry was referring to, where it says climate change is identified as a potentially significant environmental issue. So Director Dahl is just explaining to me that language, standard language from our environmental review, where you're assessing the potential for significant impacts. So we could entertain a motion if there's a motion by a board member who would like to make a change to strike the word potentially. It's here for board member to make that motion if they are so inclined.
Madam Chair, I will make that motion to see where it goes.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Okay. There's a motion to strike the word potentially under the considerations section of the resolution where climate change is identified as a potentially significant environmental issue. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Madam Chair. This is Board Member Commissioner Stroman.
Thank you, Board Member Commissioner Stroman. Any further discussion on that? So why don't we, I'm not hearing any.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I just realized I tried to raise my hand. It's this big green hand. So it looks like the Incredible Hulk is raising his hand or something. But I wanted to say I appreciate board member and Bowser Chair Van Amberg raising this issue. And I second it because I agree. And while I understand and appreciate staff sort of paralleling that language, right, of potentially significant environmental effect, that's really referring to potentially significant environmental effect of a proposed project that gets evaluated through environmental review. We're here really talking about climate change as a significant environmental issue that as a board, as a state, we are trying to address. And I think particularly given the specific items that are cited, I think that speaks to the significance of the environmental issue as determined by the legislature, the IPCC, board members of this body, and Governor Walz. And I will just note, I think that is different than saying a given project will still, could have a potentially significant environmental effect, or it may be determined not to. And so I think just to separate the environmental review language from what I think, again, board member Van Amberg rightly pointed out, is this is a significant environmental issue for the state of Minnesota and beyond.
Thank you, board member Commissioner Stroman. So any other comments or questions on this amendment to the resolution? Again, just on the amendment to strike the word potentially in the sentence, climate change is identified as a potentially significant environmental issue. Okay. Not seeing any hands up. So now we're going to vote on this amendment. This is not the vote on the overall resolution just yet. It's a vote on the amendment. So Director Dahl, would you please take the roll call on the vote?
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Board Member Grace Arnold.
Yes.
Board Member Peter Bakken. Let's see if your audio works.
Yes, I support.
Board Member Joseph Bauerkemper.
Yes.
Board Member Kenneth Foster.
Yes.
Board Member Riley Hintz.
Yes.
Board Member Mehmet Koner Steenberg.
Yes.
Board Member Nicholas Martin. Board Member Paul Nelson. Board Member Commissioner Tom Peterson.
Yes.
Board Member Commissioner Alice Roberts Davis. Board Member Commissioner Katrina Kessler. she had to run to
I
present.
think she had to leave to present.
Board Member Commissioner Sarah Stroman
Aye.
and Board Member Gerald Van Amberg.
Yes.
Board Member, Madam Chair, Nancy Daubenberger.
Yes.
Yay.
The motion passes to strike the word potentially out of the sentence. Climate change is identified as a potentially significant environmental issue. So that reads, climate change is identified as a significant environmental issue. Okay, so now I'm going to back up a little bit back to the overall resolution and further board discussion comments on that. And Public Member Martin, I believe you had a comment.
Yes, thank you. This is a comment just for myself as a public member, not on behalf of the subcommittee. I just want to come back to this issue of time and cost and uncertainty raised by Mr. Quillis, as well as a couple of the other commissioners. I have been concerned about that as well. I think that we need to be careful, especially for small businesses, as Mr. Quillis said, of imposing requirements that add time or cost or uncertainty. So I've thought about that a lot throughout the pilot program, and but ultimately I feel that since we're not deciding whether or not to have these questions on the form, really the only potential decision before us is whether or not to continue or extend the pilot program. Ultimately, it feels to me as if I'm not sure extending the pilot program would necessarily address those concerns about time, cost, and uncertainty as much as, providing the certainty of having an approved form that everyone has to use, and then providing really robust technical support and guidance to try to make sure that there's enough guidance to so that this is not a burdensome requirement for project proposers or for RGUs using the form. So I was glad to see the plan that Denise laid out for quite a lot of guidance. I hope that that's between the resources of the EQB staff and the technical team, and I hope the legislative funding for additional development of additional Minnesota-specific sort of greenhouse gas quantification tools and climate guidance. I'm really hoping that can all be really robust and over time make this kind of a routine thing that does not impose time and cost, unreasonable time and cost on people using the EAW. The one other comment I would add about that, and I thought about this as well, as we the comments that you read, Mr. Quillis, I saw them as well, and they, some of them are a little worrisome because there weren't that many projects. Some of those comments do raise concerns. One of the things I read in some of them is sort of like an uncertainty. There's a lot of tools out here, but we're really not sure what to use. Maybe two different tools provide two different answers. We're not sure. It seems a little arbitrary. We're not sure which one to pay attention to. So I'd also urge the staff and the technical team to think about if there are any ways to make the guidance a little more prescriptive, to be able to say like this is the tool you can use. The answer it gives, we know is going to be a high quality answer and will be acceptable to the RGU. And I know that EQB is limited in that sense because ultimately, the RGUs have discretion. But anything that staff can do or the technical team can do to sort of make it not just a buffet of tools, but like give guidance on which ones to use, I think will also reduce time, cost, and uncertainty to people using the form. So those are just some comments. Sort of, I'm not proposing any changes to the wording of the resolution, but I do, to give explanation where I kind of come down on still while being concerned about those things, still coming down in favor of approving the form, and then just wanting to be really sure that guidance that we develop is robust and also where possible, relatively prescriptive.
Thank you, Public Member Martin. Okay, any other comments by board members on this resolution? We're not seeing. Oh, there's one. Board Member Foster, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm really agree a lot with Commissioner Martin's comments. As a very new board member, one of the things I looked at was try to get a sense of the process that was followed here. And, I've been very impressed as I've looked and talked with other commissioners about the process. And it has been a thorough process, as was pointed out in the various presentations. I think the pilot design was done in a way that gives me a lot of hope going forward. It was done in a way that was trying to get broad participation. There was a lot of emphasis on getting input from the RGUs who participated. And I just affirm what, Commissioner Martin said, that I think we should approve this, but I think it's going to be extremely important for the board and for the EQB to monitor this and to make sure that the resources are provided so that 2 years from now, everyone will just see this as a normal thing and not as a new burdensome thing, but something that they can do and they have good tools to do it with. I think that the commitment that I've seen, in the EQB and by the board before I joined it, to making this process something that's going to be useful for RGUs and useful for the state, I think that will continue. And I have a lot of faith that, this commitment to this ombuds position, I think is going to be extremely important to help people to understand how to do this. And I just want to affirm that what Commissioner Martin said, that it's going to be very important to provide kind of Minnesota specific tools and not a big menu of different tools, because that'll just increase the complexity. So in sum, I think the implementation plan that's set out in our packet looks very good, that we can move beyond this pilot process and make this the new form that people will use. Thank you.
Thank you, Public Member Foster. And let's see. Just checking for any additional hands up. On our list, they're like these little white outlines, but when you raise them, they look like big green hands. So they're not as obvious to us. Not seeing any. I would like to mention that MPCA Commissioner Kessler has a proxy on for her now. Peter Tester, Deputy Commissioner, thank you for joining us. Okay. And then I will also mention as a board member and our MnDOT review and involvement in the form, that I also, and just maybe underscoring what Public Member Martin was talking about with the tools that'll be used, the implementation plan, the importance of good guidance and good tech support, with all of that in mind. And as a project proposer, RGU, that would be using the form on our highway projects or other transportation projects as we move forward, that we support getting that form out there for use, for all of our use, and working through the details as we go along, but not necessarily continuing the pilot any longer, but actually using that form. So I will be voting for this as well. With that, not seeing any other comments, I think I'll go ahead and read the resolution that we'll be voting on, and that is: Environmental Quality Board members support the chair in replacing the July 2013 environmental assessment worksheet form with a December 2022 environmental assessment worksheet form in accordance with the authorities and responsibilities identified in Minnesota statutes 116D and Minnesota Rules, Chapter 4410. All project reviews that begin after the state must use the approved form. Projects currently underway, which are not already using the newly approved form, may continue to use the prior approved form. This is the resolution, and I would like to see if there are any board members who would like to make a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Public Member Mehmet. Do I have a second?
This is Riley Hintz. I'll second.
Thank you, Public Member Hinz. Any discussion? All right, not hearing anything and not seeing any hands. I'm just actually going to do a last call. Just jump in if I missed a hand here from a board member. Nope, not seeing anything. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Director Dahl to take the roll on the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, first up, we have Commissioner Grace Arnold,
Yes.
Board Member Peter Bakken,
Yes.
Board Member Joseph Bauerkemper,
Yes.
Board Member Commissioner Nancy Daubenberger,
Yes.
Board Member Kenneth Foster.
Yes.
Now that Commissioner Steve Grove is absent, Board Member Riley Hintz,
Yes.
Commissioner Katrina Kessler is also absent, Board Member Mehmet Koner Steenberg,
Yes.
and Malcolm is absent. Board Member Nicholas Martin.
Yes.
Board Member Paul Nelson. Board Member Commissioner Tom Peterson.
Yes.
Member Alice Roberts Davis is absent. Board Member Sarah Stroman. Commissioner Sarah.
Aye.
And Board Member Gerald Van Amberg.
Yes.
For enough votes to pass, so the resolution passes. Thank you, everyone, and thank you again to all those who worked on this forum. There has been a lot of time and effort and coordination put into this, and again, another thanks for your leadership, Commissioner Stroman, as well as Public Member Martin and your teams who worked on this too, and the EQB staff. Denise, special thanks to you for your leadership in this as well. So, with that, now I'll introduce the next agenda item, and that is the summary of the continuous improvement process for environmental review. So welcome, Kayla Walsh, our EQB project manager, as well as Karen Gates and Miriam Nada from the Management Analysis and Development, or MAD, part of the Minnesota Department of Management and Budget. Kayla, I will turn it to you when you're ready.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the board. For the public audience, again, my name is Kayla Walsh, and I am the Environmental Review Administrator for the Environmental Quality Board, and I'm glad to be with you all today to present on our continuous improvement effort for environmental review. So I will begin the presentation with some background information and then hand it over to our project consultants to explain this effort in a little more detail and walk us through a project timeline. So we've already heard today about the intricacies of environmental review. So I'm only going to very briefly recenter us in the process and the purpose of the program. So again, as we discuss improving the environmental review program, it's helpful to keep in mind that its intent, as it is currently written, is to provide usable information to communities, decision makers, and project proposers for a wide variety of projects during their design phase. And this is a separate process from permitting, and it provides details beyond those needed for permit compliance. So it provides public disclosure of all project-related potential environmental effects in one singular document to inform governmental approvals. But environmental review in and of itself is not an approval process, so projects do not pass or fail environmental review. The Environmental Review Program started almost 50 years ago thanks to the adoption of the Minnesota Environmental Policy Act in 1973, otherwise known as MEPA. MEPA was the first law in Minnesota that brought the focus of wider environmental concerns down to a programmatic level. And the authors of MEPA were young legal minds and recreationists that observed the environmental degradation occurring around them in Minnesota and nationwide. So the Cuyahoga River, for example, as what is on this slide, caught fire in Cleveland, Ohio. There was untreated sewage being released into the waters across Minnesota. Smog warnings in the Twin Cities were a common occurrence, and 67,000 tons a day of taconite tailings dumped into at Silver Bay. So in 1973, the authors of MEPA were watching this emergency in progress, and they decided to look into the future in designing MEPA. And we are at a similar crossroads today as we watch climate change intensify, storm activities, as temperatures rise, and as ecosystems change irreparably. So as we find ourselves at the similar juncture in time as the authors of MEPA once did, we also have a similar opportunity to, like them, advance the system that we have in place and allow it to adapt to continue serving Minnesotans for the next 50 years. And that is the impetus for building a continuous improvement process. So there have been periodic reviews of our environmental review program over its lifetime, which have resulted in several reports. And these reports identify challenges in the program and make recommendations for improvements. However, very few of these recommendations have since been carried to fruition. EQB staff, we receive many requests for program changes, but have limited resources and therefore have the need to prioritize these changes and prioritize the ones that will have the biggest return on investment. Sure. Wondering if I can just, if I hold this, is that better? Okay. All right, thank you for letting me know. So historically, program updates have occurred through legislative direction, mandatory category evaluation, or other initiatives, usually in response to a specific issue. A continuous improvement process will take these past recommendations and these past reports and take them into consideration and prioritize them all holistically and proactively alongside current feedback and engagement. So in April of this year, EQB staff presented to the board on the idea of starting this continuous improvement effort. As that was overall well received, EQB since entered into a contract with consultants to perform this work, which will take place between now and June 30th, 2023. All data will be analyzed by our consultants who will form a final report. So at its core, continuous improvement is a collaborative process used to identify changes in a strategic, transparent, and efficient manner for long-term implementation. By providing a framework for continuous improvement, the Environmental Review Program will be able to responsively adapt to changing needs of our environment. And an adaptable program will benefit from this process of continuous evaluation and will more easily consider and respond to the emerging environmental concerns, technical advances in tools, resources, and scientific knowledge. So our consultants, who you will hear from in a moment, will consider feedback and past recommendations in order to do the following. First, they'll help us identify and define what components make an effective environmental review program. So we'll solicit feedback on what an effective program looks like and ask if the program implementation now aligns with how it's currently outlined in rule. So this could mean identifying our values such as transparency, public engagement, or accountability. And we want to make sure that we have a shared vision of what effectiveness means across all audiences. Second, We will develop a list of improvements, and those improvements could be as small as updating guidance or as large as policymaking or rulemaking. And then lastly, our consultants will help us develop criteria. How do we weigh things like time, cost, and effort when we want to prioritize making these improvements? So the overall result of this effort will be a prioritized list of actions that the board may take in order to make program improvements and changes. So we're really excited to delve into this complex and transformational work of our program. So now it's my pleasure to invite our consultants to speak, and I will hand it over to Karen Gatis, who is joining us virtually to introduce herself and her team. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Kayla. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Gatis, and I am with Management Analysis and Development. On the next slide, we have an overview of our organization. We are an in-house consulting group within state government, housed at Minnesota Management and Budget. We are state employees, but we are not employees of EQB. We are working with EQB under an interagency agreement. We do research and analysis type consulting and also organizational development consulting. On our team is myself, the project lead, Karen Gatis, Miriam Nada, who is going to be talking about the research and engagement aspects of our project, is also on the team. She goes by Nada. And then Munkle Tang is on our team as well, and he's not here with us today. In the next slide, Nada is going to be talking about our research and engagement work.
Good afternoon. I'm Mariam Nada, but I go by my last name Nada, as Karen mentioned. So I'm leading the research component of the Continuous Improvement Project. We're approaching this work in phases. In phase 1, which we kicked off in the fall, through February, we're going to be conducting research. My colleague, Munkle Tang, that Karen just mentioned, is reviewing all past EQB program evaluations to compile all the recommendations from these efforts so we can build on previous improvement recommendations. We're conducting state comparison research through interviews with other states to learn about program improvements that they have made, as well as success stories in their environmental review programs. These states include California, Massachusetts, Washington, and Wisconsin. We're also doing a focused literature review of legislative, academic, and administrative sources to understand best practices in managing environmental review programs. We will produce a research summary outlining our findings. In phase 2, starting this winter, we'll be engaging with the public and others of interest to the program. We will conduct one online listening session in January. We will gather online feedback through Engagement HQ, and EQB will be leading parallel tribal engagement to get input as well. Slide. Our goal is to launch Engagement HQ and to gather broad input on the proposed draft question. How does the environmental review program currently serve you? If it does not serve you, what improvements could help you? The page setup will be similar to the one EQB conducted for the Minnesota Pollinator Action Framework. With the open-ended question, our goal is to provide participants an opportunity to provide feedback as well as interact with each other for a dynamic experience. This page will be run on the EQB Engagement HQ site, but MAD consultants will be doing the synthesis and analysis of the feedback. I will pass it back to my colleague, Karen.
Thanks, Nada. The project has two major aspects, two major chunks. First, it's the research and the engagement, and then that information is feeding into the facilitation. We are going to be facilitating conversations with the board, the ERA subcommittee, as well as the interagency team. So the climate technical interagency team is going to be morphing into the continuous improvement interagency team. Not all members are transferring over to the CI or continuous improvement interagency team, but quite a few of the members who are on the climate technical team are going to be with us for the next 6 months. So the interagency team is going to be meeting on the same schedule. approximately every other week for an hour. And then that information and those ideas are going to be helping to inform the conversations with the board and ERIS, as well as engagement and research information. The items that we're going to be focusing our conversations on are what Kayla was talking about initially. We are going to be talking about defining environmental review program effectiveness, looking at a list of improvements, and then coming up with criteria and a matrix for prioritizing improvements. Then all of the efforts with the project, the research, the engagement, and the facilitated conversations, all of that is going to be fed into a final report. And then an important point is the last item, input on implementation, what to do with this information, what are the next steps. So all of this is going to be taking place over the next 7 months, concluding at the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. We are going to have monthly updates for the board, January through May. And then this is our initial kickoff here at the December meeting. The board is going to have the opportunity throughout the project to work on the 3 areas that we mentioned: defining effectiveness, looking at program improvements, and then figuring out how to prioritize those improvements. We are going to have discussion at the end of this presentation, so we also want to get your input on engagement and engagement HQ, which I believe is our last slide. Yes, it is. So first, we wanted to ask you more in general if you have any questions on the information that we presented, and then we're going to focus in on a few questions about engagement. So I will ask the members if you have any questions on what we just presented about the continuous improvement project.
Well, thank you to Kayla and Karen and Nada for your presentation and the information you just shared in looking to kick this off. So we'll have discussion, but I see we have questions up here. Were you going to facilitate the questions, Karen?
Yes, we were going to go through these 4 questions, the 2 more general questions, and then we wanted to get some input on the draft engagement HQ question that we have up on the slide, if that's okay.
Sounds good. So on the first one, any questions on the information presented? Any questions or comments from board members? Not seeing any at this point. Okay. So should we move on to the question about engagement activities? Input on engagement activities or suggested key audiences. I'm sure some folks have thoughts on that. We have Public Member Bauer Camper. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Kayla and Karen and Nada for embarking on this work. I just want to note that I was pleased to see that the EQB is undertaking a distinct and a parallel tribal engagement process, which I think is necessary to do that in the government-to-government relations mode, which is a little bit different, or quite a bit different than some of the other modes of engagement. So it's good to see that. I'll note now that I hope that tribal relations will become among the continuous improvement opportunities that the board decides to prioritize through this process. But of course, we'll see how that plays out substantively. And I'll take this opportunity to humbly, if I can, encourage the commissioners that are here with us on the EQB to consider nudging your tribal liaisons and your agencies in order that they will engage with Kayla and with the EQB in that process, because those are invaluable folks. You know, if we're gonna include the potential opportunities in tribal relations among continuous improvement, we've got to engage with tribes about what that would look like and entail. So, so if commissioners have an opportunity to nudge your liaisons, they're super busy and doing all kinds of important work. But if they have opportunities to engage with Kayla in this process, I think that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Bauer Kemper. Very good point and duly noted, ensuring engagement of tribal liaisons at each of our agencies. Okay, other thoughts on engagement activities? Not seeing any hands on that question at this point, but just thought on that from an agency perspective. I think as we engage our folks who are closest to this process, we will be able to come up with audiences to target venues to suggest on that. So I'm sure we'll have more suggestions here as we kick this off. But I'll pause just to see if any other hands came up. Nope, not on that one. Okay, so then we'll move on to the question about input on the proposed Engagement HQ platform. So the question, how does the environmental review program currently serve you? If it does not serve you, what improvements could help you? So I think what we're looking for here is are we asking the right question? Is it phrased in a way that's going to get some good input? Any thoughts on that? Commissioner Stroman, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on this question. And I think as I read this question, I could probably provide useful input if I'm already familiar with the environmental review program, what it does, what its purpose is, how I can engage with it. If I have no idea what the environmental review program does, and so it doesn't currently serve me because I'm not really familiar with it, I'm not sure I could constructively answer the second question. And so just, to the point of, if part of the goal of the continuous improvement is to get information from people who are not already in the tent, so to speak, using the program, I'm not sure this question helps be inclusive to folks who are not. And so I think maybe just, something broadening that out a little bit, like if you're not, something like, not only if it does not serve you, what improvements, but if you're not familiar with the program, would you like to be, and how, if I don't know, I think there's something else that needs to be there for people who aren't already familiar, because I'm not sure that they would know where to start with these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stroman. Other thoughts on that question? Board Member Foster, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I agree with that, what Commissioner Stroman said, that the question seems very broad. I wonder if there's different audiences identified, that there might be some variations on the questions. I mean, and so I gather from this that you may be asking, I don't know how that platform works, but if you're asking just one question with a follow-on, that might be very difficult to construct for all the different types of people or stakeholders who might want to answer it. So yeah, I'd encourage, again, I don't have a good answer, but encourage us to think about what questions are going to be easy to answer in a way, because as Commissioner Stroman said, the biggest problem is often we don't know how to answer it, so then we don't. So but thank you so much for your work on this. I'm excited about this continuous improvement process. I sense that it's kind of long overdue in a way, and excited to have the different people involved in leading that. So thank you.
Thank you, Public Member Foster. Your hands up. Or just jump in if I'm missing your hand. Not seeing anything. A thought I'd offer on that, why don't we go to Public Member Nelson?
I'm quiet, which is unusual, not because I don't have a lot of ideas, but because I read it and I do like the process and I'm very about this. My brain is moving on to the next steps, which I don't. Thank you for this. I think that if we do this right, that might get at some of the things we talked about earlier in terms of this. And so that's one of the reasons I'm excited about it.
Thank you, Public Member Nelson. And I was going to share a thought I have on this question as well. And in consideration of Commissioner Stroman's comment on that, and that is, I wonder if the question could be triaged. So it's potentially two parts, and the second part could vary based on the answer to the first part, and that first part being something to the effect of what is your familiarity or what has been your experience with the environmental review program, and then the question of how has it served you or what concerns you have might be characterized a little differently based on how the first part could be answered. I'm saying that as somebody who's worked on, for instance, highway projects, and what it means to somebody as a project proposer using the environmental review program might be different than another environmental stakeholder. So we could potentially triage that a little bit. But just a thought on that first question on the engagement HQ. Okay. Sounds like we've got a comment or clarification from Denise Wilson, our EP staff person. Go ahead, Denise.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Your comments are well noted in that the current way that the question is framed is towards people who have experienced the environmental review program. One of the challenges with our program is for the general public, they mostly don't engage with our program unless there's a project that they care about. And one of the challenges that we face is trying to teach them about the program while there's heightened sensitivity and concern about something they care about. And so that's an ongoing struggle with the program. But I'm wondering if one way we could address this is in the introduction, we could talk about the purpose of environmental review. You know, one of the primary objectives is to provide usable information about a proposed project's potential environmental effects to a community. And then we could, make that statement and then show a link to the EAW form and ask them more broadly, do these prompts get at the information that would be usable to you, or something along those lines, so that we could both teach and respond to people who have never had any interaction before, but also get at the people who are sort of recurring participants.
Thank you, Denise. Those thoughts. I appreciate that clarification on where we could go with this. Any other thoughts from board members or questions? Primarily thoughts, getting input on this engagement HQ question. Not seeing any. Okay. Maybe with that, Kayla, could I turn it back to you or your team to either wrap this topic or give any potential follow-up thoughts on what you just heard?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So thank you everyone for your constructive feedback and excitement in regards to the project. And we are really looking forward to facilitating more conversations with you all over the next 6 months. And as Karen mentioned, we'll be coming back to you with more questions and facilitated discussion to implement this program. So I will pass it over to Karen and Nada if you have any other closing thoughts, but thank you all.
Thank you, everyone, Chair and EQB board. Nice to meet you and get to participate in your meeting. we are going to be moving forward with the research and the engagement steps in the project. And then I believe in February, we will be presenting a recap of what we learned with the research. And then at the next board meeting that we have, we will be talking about the engagement learnings. So you'll get to hear a summary of what we've learned from these two processes. Nada, did you want to add anything?
Thank you. No, I think you covered all of it.
Okay. And then we just have a last slide, which is a closing slide with our contact information. So we look forward to working with you. We've worked with several agencies, boards, work groups on similar processes. So we look forward to implementing what we've learned with other similar projects with the EQB board. So thank you for letting us be part of your meeting today.
Thank you again, Kayla and Karen and Nada. Really appreciate the information today, and we look forward to having you back to continue the discussion on this and as it moves forward, getting up. So that brings us to the last formal item on the agenda before our public comment period. Yes. So with that, okay. So the board welcomes oral public comments on agenda items and other topics. Will follow the public comment procedure and guidelines provided on page 2 of the packet. So with that, we're going to slide up. Please raise your hand in WebEx if you would like to comment. If there's anyone in the room for any further public comments, let us know. But we'll call on those signed up in person, although we just had one. Is that was already covered? Great. Okay, thank you. Director Dahl is saying no hands yet, but he is standing by to call on anybody to raise their hand and provide an oral comment. All right. Well, then I think that brings us to closing. So thank you again, board members, those who came here today and those who participated online for your work over this last year. We've reached the end of the agenda, and with that, looking forward to our meetings next year and our continued work together. So happy holidays to those who celebrate any over the next month, or any peaceful time that you'll have over the next month with holidays coming up. So with that, I would like to take a motion for adjournment. To provide a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Public Member Martin. Motion to adjourn. Second. Thank you, Public Member Nelson. Great. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Not hearing any opposition, the motion carries and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.